like to know what is happening with this native sign language. What do the deaf people say? Which language are they comfortable with? Members, we are going to take on questions. If you have any question, any comment, kindly be brief. But also keep in mind that we have interpreters, so as you talk, make sure you don't move fast. So we shall take on like 3 questions and then we shall move with another session. Thank you. Any question? Any comment? Yes?
My question is, since Cameroon has different sign languages, which sign language are interpreters in Cameroon are trained in? And does this match with what deaf people use in their everyday life?
So I will try to answer, and I'm so happy that Dr. Sam is here because he did a great research on Cameroonian Sign Language, so he could support me when we reach to that aspect. So they are trained in American Sign Language and French Sign Language. That is what interpreter or people in general are trained at the university if they manage through the process of having those language. And that's the problem, that it really didn't reflect what the deaf community is using now. So when, for example, I go in school, what is usually happen is the teacher will say to the kid, you are using the wrong sign, because the teacher or the interpreter has been trained to use this specific sign from the language. Another example, so in French Sign Language, to say the boss, so the chief, they use this sign, okay? But in Cameroonians, what I have saw from the student, from the young people, they will use this. Why? Because they are reflecting how the people from the police are, you know, the people that have the power, because the people have the power, have a uniform, they have grade. So that is how the student understand people that have power, for example. In another school that we work, priests, that you could be like this, they use a different sign. They use priest. Why? Because in this school, all the priests are doctor. So they associate the Catholic profession with the Catholic vocation with the profession of the people. And that is what is happening, that they are creating new sign. They are adapting the sign according to their need, according to their understanding. But the professional or the teacher are still behind because they want to focus on, that is what my teacher told me at school. That is what my dictionary I'd have at home told me. That's also why we want to work on creating, collecting all those signs and starting providing to the people to say, yeah, that is what it was used 20 years ago in the country. That is what the people are using now.
I will take on one more question and then we'll continue.
I just wanted to know, we're talking about French and we're talking about English and the colonial language, and I just wondered if there was anything about the traditional languages of Africa and what happens to those languages for deaf people. Do they have access to any sort of original languages within Africa, or are those off limits to deaf people?
Okay, let's take Dr. Sam's submission. Briefly.
Thank you so much. What was your name sign again? Andre. Thank you. So my question is around Cameroon. I went to visit in 2018. I think, yes, 2018. So I went there to do research in Cameroon. So if you look at Cameroon, there are 2 languages. Firstly, English, and then also that is associated with ASL, and in the Y area, it is LSF, French Sign Language, and in the southern part, okay. In the north, they do a more native sign language. You know about this, right? Okay. So I'm just curious, with ASL, it is connected to English and the spoken language that is associated with that. So when individuals speak French, they sign LSF as well. However, and you can see the differences in the initialized signs, using the L for life and the V for VIF. So I'm just curious, when you see interpreters working, do they have that repertoire between the two languages, between the two sign languages? So we've done some research in LDP, but there's not a lot of evidence-based research available. So the question is around the interpreters and being able to work between the different sign languages in your country.
So I will first answer Audrey's question. So I will answer Audrey's question, and then I will answer and comment Dr. Sam's question. So what about the African language? So consider that in Cameroon we have more than 300 national language there. And even for the hearing people, there's not a consensus on how we can teach it in school. So usually what the national education system agree is based on the city you are, they can teach in the school the predominant language of the city. That is how it works for everyone. But people are free to do, it's not mandatory. When it comes to deaf, there's an issue. There's two issues. The first issue is if the interpreter do not understand the language, he could not do the passage. And the second issue is the parent and the teacher will tell you that they have other priority. The priority for them is to learn sign language because most of them are from rearing parents, so they learn sign language in school, and they will say the other priority is to learn French or English. But what I have seen in remote area is this deaf kid are still used to hear or to see their parents speak in their national language. So they do understand somehow what it means. They do understand somehow what are the use, how their culture is working. They don't have all the access to respond to it, but they still have access. But at school level, we are still not reached that aspect. So now I respond to Dr. Sam, who is not paying attention. Okay, so what about, as we were saying, yeah. So I didn't mention in my presentation that in some part of Cameroon, there's also a growing of local sign, willingness of the interpreter. I do know interpreter, we want to know all the repertoire, know all what is happening, and have this different, the different aspect of signing in ASL and speaking in French, initialization, adaptation of sign. But a lot of interpreters really just focus on the official sign language, if you want to say it. So they want to use American Sign Language as they had been taught. And always, that is also an issue that we are facing. That most of the time, when an interpreter go to sign for a meeting, a conference and thing, a lot of time the deaf people say, I do not understand you. Because they move on. They're not anymore using that sign. It's not anymore relevant for the context. It's not anymore relevant for the community. But the interpreter is still behind. Because we are also lacking specific space where both interpreter and deaf community could meet. The only space for now where you can meet deaf people is school. That is a specific setting where most of the time the teacher are hearing. So they are the one dictated how to do it. And they will say, in my dictionary, they sign it like this. I don't want you to sign in a different way. So that's a little bit how it works. So it's really a promotion of, do it. We are trying to collect. For now, we have collected 100 signs, different signs from the different schools where we want to do it a little bit more before we try to share it. So a little bit for the interpreter to start understanding that the community is moving, the community is just going. So they can't be behind. They really need to reach the community. Thank you very much.
Members, thank you very much. Andre, thank you so much for the presentation. Can we appreciate Andre? Thank you. We do have another session, and I would like to welcome Robert to introduce our next speaker. Robert, you are welcome.
Hi, everyone. My name is Robert. I'm from Uganda, and I am the director of the Ugandan Deaf Association. I've been given a very easy job today. I get to introduce our next presenter. And I think this is the correct sign name, maybe? I would like to introduce Razak. Razak Fakir is going to be our next presenter. This is the correct sign name, so Razak Fakir. Razak is a WASLI WFD accredited international sign interpreter, as well as a professional translator. He is also a member of AIIC, AIC, the Association of Conference Interpreters. He's been working for many years in sign language interpreting and translation. Also working in deaf education in South Africa at Wits University. Yes. So he did the academic transition working in education, educating deaf individuals. He is now back to being a full-time sign language interpreter and translator and is devoted to that work. He also has founded a new organization called Urberg. This organization is headquartered in Estonia, specifically in the city of Tallinn. So I'm very pleased to welcome him to the stage. Razak, if you could please take the stage. Warm welcome to Razak, thank you. Welcome our next expert. Hi, everyone. You've been having to listen to everyone with your ears, so I hope you're all ready to now use your eyes to watch the next presentation. You're feeling awake and ready. I'm really pleased to be here. My name is Razak, as I was already introduced. I'm a deaf interpreter. But my first identity as a deaf individual, yes, and a sign language, my identities, used to first see me as a deaf person, and then also see me in my work as an interpreter and translator. Let me make sure I'm in camera. Okay. There's always a bit of adjusting when we first start presenting. So I want to talk about the concept of Ubuntu, which I know all of us here in Africa are very familiar with the philosophy of us coming together as one community and following this philosophy. My slides, unfortunately, are not able to come on the screen, but if you would like the PowerPoint, I'm happy to share it with you. We'll see if maybe the tech team is able to show the slides. I first want to talk about my own positionality, who I am as a person and my role. I'm a deaf interpreter. I also am a teacher and a trainer. I train and teach those in sign language and sign language interpreting and translation as well. I established my company Orberg to be able to continue these networks and relationships, to partner with different organizations, to provide trainings and support for future interpreters with the goal of us furthering our field, making sure that we have appropriate ethical standards, that we have good and quality of service in our interpreters and our interpreting service that we provide, but also staying rooted in culture and having that cultural understanding of what deaf communities need to make sure that, again, that what we are signing is culturally relevant. And as it says in the URCPD, it's very clearly stated that the information. It's telling the interpreter if I'm going too fast, they can let me know. I'm going to also do a bit of a comparison with the global north and other parts of the world and Africa and what our work looks like. And you might be wondering why I'm up here presenting today. I'd like to pose a question to all of you. We're in a space where international sign is being utilized. We come from international spaces. We have our team of wonderful interpreters here. I'm sure yesterday and today you've been listening and watching the interpreters work. And I would like to really emphasize that this team is a very good team because it is not a full team of hearing interpreters. We have deaf interpreters and hearing interpreters working together. And my presentation is going to really touch on the importance of those mixed team interpreting teams. I work globally. So I'm familiar with the different structures and systems, and I see the different structural barriers that we face in our work. And one thing that we have to do is we have to work together. I've gone to multiple WASLI WFD conferences in the past. I've seen these blended teams where you have deaf and hearing teams working on stage. In South America, we see this happen often. In the United States, North America, in Europe. So these blended teams are common in many regions of the world, Asia as well. We do see it in the African continent as well, but it's always an international sign. So what about our local sign language interpreters? Why do we not see more blended teams in our local sign languages? We don't see that same standard applied at the local level. Why is that? We have our own unique barriers that we face here on the continent. As we've already talked about the past few days, lack of training systems, not having secure organizations, the different types of lobbying and advocacy work that we need to do. One example is who is often interpreting for our news on the TV and media. It's often hearing interpreters that are the ones that are nominating themselves to work for news briefings, to be in the media. That interpreting doesn't always happen into the spoken language. So who is doing the sign language interpreting for this information? So people will ask, who's able to do this, and we will give them names. Here are deaf individuals that can do this. They can work in a blended team. We don't see that happening as much. But if we do that, we could show a good model for future deaf children who would want to be interpreters in the future. And we're here at Afsli, which is such a beautiful space. Sorry, there's a mic problem. What is going to be our impact after the conference? In 2017, we gathered in Abuja, Nigeria. So we had our 2017 conference where we came together. Timothy was one of the hosts of this conference, as he mentioned earlier today. So what was the impact after this gathering? Again, this was almost 10 years ago, May of 2017. I was there, I gave a presentation, I was able to network and meet many of you. And we see the same topics coming up over and over again without much change. And we see there's a clear need for more deaf interpreter representation in the work that we're doing. So after the 2017 conference, we got together as a team to discuss potential strategies. And then in 2018, we had a strategic planning meeting in South Africa. So in 2017, we decided who this team would be at the conference. I was there, and Natasha. When the conference concluded, we wanted to see how we could take what we learned to then disseminate. We wanted to have further advocacy, collaborations, what actual activities and planning could we make happen into actionable items. We were able to secure funding for future training. And that training we did in partnership, again, with deaf hearing teams, myself as a deaf interpreter, Natasha as a hearing interpreter. Aisha was a part of this team as well. So we started this collaboration, and this work started in 2017. In 2018 was our strategic planning meeting. And that same year, we saw, Thelma started doing training with EDEF as well. I think Dimakatsu, who's on this current interpreting team, was a part of that training. That was in 2018 that Thelma and EDEF organization organized. So we see the trickle-down effects from this 2017 conference. And then in 2021, we had the first two accredited WASLI WFD African interpreters, myself and Natasha. And we were both accredited at the same time. We had worked together previously. We worked in this blended team regularly. In 2022, Aisha got her accreditation. And this was able to happen because we work in collaboration, because we value each other equally as a team. Marsan also was accredited, also works in our blended teams as well. So we see the clear positive effects of working truly side by side with each other. I've known the interpreting team for many years. I know Sam as well is interpreting right now. We have all worked together in different capacities for the past 20 years. So I really want us to think about what the after effects of this conference will be. And we need to continue to work together so we can see further impact, so we can have more deaf interpreters on our teams. Without collaboration, none of this is possible. We need to not push our deaf colleagues aside and make sure that we are all truly working as one team together. And giving mutual support and mutual respect so we can further elevate our field. If we could go back. Okay, my presentation is up. Could we go forward in the slides, please? Back to the positionality slide, the concept of positionality. Deaf interpreters are the keepers of sign language. We have grown up, it is our first language, we've grown up using the language. We are fully understanding of our own community. We have such a rich knowledge to pass on to hearing interpreters. We have that true lived experience. I have a question for all of you. You don't need to answer it right now. But if you really take a moment to think about yourself as an interpreter, and if you were to say, yes, I am truly a very qualified interpreter, do you often work with deaf interpreters? Are you a good interpreter because of the deaf community? And if that answer is no, then you need to rethink your own position. Going back to the concept of Ubuntu, nothing happens individually. It happens as a collective. I am because we are. We need community, we need each other. And this applies to the interpreting field as well. Deaf interpreters, hearing interpreters. For our profession to truly flourish, we need each other. We need to work hand in hand. And not just think purely from a medical perspective of you're hearing, you're deaf. We're all equally capable of doing the job. And it's so vital to really not just compare our work just because we happen to be deaf or one of us is hearing. You might have forgotten that we have also interpreters working into spoken French as well in the back. So we have interpreters working in the booth in the background, working from English into French. So we have another interpreting team. So we have multiple interpreting teams in this room this week. So you see one interpreter coming on stage, but don't forget that there's a much larger team working together. Photograph that I was really hoping to show you. It's a photo from Europe.
This refers to a time when the African continent was being colonized, and specifically the Shaka Zulu story that we know about. They had spears, they had traditional weapons, versus the colonizers who had different weapons. So Europe came to South Africa and Africa. This was a picture of that meeting. Higher as the king, Shaka Zulu. And there is a colonizer, an Englishman, he's standing there and he's trying to communicate. You can see they're trying to communicate with each other in this image. Here we have two individuals facilitating the communication between them. It just brings us back to many, many years ago, that interpreting already existed for thousands of years. It's not something that only started to become into existence recently. So as deaf interpreters, we also have to look back into our history. We were born into a deaf community, we represent that community. And often hearing interpreters will ask me questions around sign language. I will give them information, I will give them my knowledge because I have that lived experience. So when we work together, we have to communicate with each other, but we have to support each other. I bring that native knowledge, my culture, my understanding, and my concept of what being a deaf person is and sign language. Many of the hearing interpreters do not reside in the deaf community. Even if they did, they still don't have the same lived experience. It's not a case of learning a bit of sign language and then you can interpret. No, you have to be immersive in our culture, in our communities, and start to really instinctively understand our language. Sign language is not just, it's good for everyone. It's good for the hearing interpreter to immerse themselves in our culture and in our language because that makes them a better interpreter. I see that many situations require the interpreter to have a good understanding of English terminology, like, for example, in the health sector, or they go to an education or university level. The interpreter needs to be on par with the content. So research has shown that we need interpreters, or deaf interpreters, in certain settings. For example, myself, I don't come with a label as deaf interpreter or look at my partner as a hearing interpreter. We are both interpreters. That's it. It's not about being hearing and about being deaf. It's about finding that teamwork and that collaboration. And take away the audiological view. So if we look at Christopher, we look at Jemina, we have people who are doing research in the field of sign language and interpreting, trying to find the best way and evidence of what is the best interpreting team. And they have evidence that being a blended team delivers the best quality work. Many people, many deaf communities don't understand the interpreters on television when they are interpreting the content. When we have a deaf interpreter on that TV screen, they often find that they have a better understanding of the content. So it's not just us. We have to and we must give that equal opportunity and understanding of this blended team. I'm in Rwanda now, but I have met many of you in different countries. And even in my own country sometimes, I can't find, many of our communities say, we can't find an interpreter. But specifically, deaf interpreters are even more scarce to find. But if you look in the right places and you really look, you will find deaf interpreters in your communities. They are already there. But maybe you as a deaf person feel, oh, the hearing interpreters, they just know so much more. Be aware of the power imbalance that often occurs because a person is hearing. Just because they can hear doesn't mean that they have better knowledge than you do. Sure, when they speak to another person who's hearing, they can continue and without you, but you, as the deaf interpreter or the interpreter, have as much power in that relationship. It does make it difficult because we do experience a lot of autism and there's a lot of gatekeeping that occurs. But in our lives, we have the experience to be interpreters ourselves. We have many deaf interpreters here in Africa. And I'm happy to see some of you here. When there's a conference held on African soil, it is lovely to see you here. But when we go home again, let's just clarify. I am Malawian. I was born Malawian and then moved to South Africa. I only started a company for sign language interpreters recently, but I have interpreters in my team that I'm training. We have 6 Malawian interpreters here. I am so proud to see them and also for them to become international interpreters. But there's more competency in the local sign language for now. There's a lot more work to do, to be done, to make sure that the confidence is built and the skills are improved so that we can all work towards international sign interpreting as well. So it's building the competency at a local level for our deaf interpreters. I'd like to speak to tokenism. Often, as interpreters, we want to be seen as equals in our teams, whether you're hearing or whether you're deaf. But now the question is whether we include a deaf interpreter in our teams because we just want to tick that box. Or are we truly creating access? Are we just selecting a deaf person to work with so that we are seen as doing the right thing, or are we actually doing the right thing? Really working together as equals, making sure that we do the same work. It should be seen as being married for life, that we have blended teams. It's the same type of commitment. I know many deaf interpreters here, like Aisha, like Sam. You have a lot of experience. You've been exposed to the academic world. You've been into universities. You have seen who is in the academic world. And it's not because they were being supported or guided by anybody else. They stood up for themselves, and they took it into their own hands to find out where the information is, where they can be the leaders in their field. We cannot have the interpreting industry operate without having deaf interpreters and hearing interpreters working in a blended team. In the past, traditionally, deaf people were the ones to do the training. But when it comes to creative lobbying for policies, having a seat at the table when we are having the important decisions being discussed, that's when we need to be blended in our teams. How are we going to approach governments to lobby for our needs? How are we going to apply for funding? It cannot just be us. It needs to be a blended team to make sure that the government also sees and realizes that when a sign language organization is established, that it is blended, but also that deaf people can do the training and should be doing the training. I know at university institutions, they have certain regulations in place that require employees to have a degree before they can start working there. So make sure you have that degree. Make sure you collaborate with a university. See where the universities can collaborate with each other to ensure that you are growing as an individual to obtain your qualifications. So make sure you speak to the right people to get the right advice. So to be a good interpreter, it's not about being seen. But if you want to be a good interpreter, work with a blended team. Make sure you have a deaf counterpart, an equal counterpart. We need to work as one team going forward. And this needs to happen consistently. If I am approached for an assignment where they need interpreters, don't only think of yourself and work all on your own. Think about having that deaf interpreter with you. Think about being in a team. It's going to make life so much easier for you, but also you're sharing the knowledge with each other. And the quality of service you deliver is what it should be. So a deaf interpreter is not just a tool for you to use, but is an equal partner in that team. You both do the same work. There's something else I would like to say, but I'm just checking I have enough time.
Five minutes left, and then I have to sit on my hands. I want to speak specifically to this conference. I'm very happy to be back at Afsli. I feel very proud to be here. One thing I would just like to put out for all of you is food for thought for future conferences for us to think about. For whoever is the local host of the conference, the local host could also sign. Show us some of your local sign language. Show us the skills of your interpreters. Sign your presentations. We want to see the local sign language. We want to see your interpreters highlighted as well. That's really important for us to see that. So prioritizing the use of sign language at our future conferences. We have sign language interpreters, sign language. We want to see more. We're called sign language interpreters, so we want to see more sign language happening in our spaces at our conferences. It doesn't have to be international sign. We also need to see the local sign languages. There's people during the coffee break or lunch that I would like to network and meet, but I see everyone using spoken language, and so you feel unapproachable. There was a conversation yesterday about how people can learn international sign, how IS is obtained, what the history behind IS interpreting is, how language gets passed on. We have our list of accredited interpreters, how do we contact them, what are the minimum requirements, and it says you need to know a minimum of maybe 2 different sign languages, 2 to 3 sign languages, and then you can go for your international sign qualification. And now with different technological advances, we're able to meet remotely. There's so many more opportunities for us to learn different sign languages to then be able to learn IS if that is a goal that you would like to reach. So to get that minimum, 2 to 3 sign languages, the opportunities are more available because we can work remotely. You don't have to physically travel somewhere. So I want us to keep that in mind as well too, to also prioritize our local sign languages and the learning of other national sign languages. There were multiple points talked about yesterday, and learning about our different countries and the diversity, how one country might sign something compared to another. That is how we grow and flourish. We learn from each other in that way. So we don't just go from one local sign language straight to international sign. Think about the opportunity you have in this room to meet each other and learn different national sign languages. And maybe in 5 years' time, you're working together as a team, showing the world what African interpreters can do. A profession grows when every voice in the community is heard. If you want to be an accredited interpreter, you want to establish sign language organizations, we have different goals and things we would like to lobby and advocate for. We do that as a community. And I will leave you with that. Thank you. Can I run away now, or do I have to stay on stage? Maureen, am I allowed to go away?
Yeah, no. Thank you very much, Razak, for the wonderful presentation. Members, let's appreciate Razak for the good presentation. I want us to accept that in Africa, deaf interpreting is something new. And I would like briefly to know from Razak, your presentation, you've not talked about the training of these deaf interpreters. Is it important for the deaf interpreters to undergo the training, like the hearing interpreters? I will take on 2 more questions, and then we shall move to another session. Thank you. 1, and then 2.
Thank you
Razak, for your presentation. It was very inspirational. In the UK, there is a growing number of deaf interpreters. When we are amongst our peers, we don't call them deaf interpreters, they are interpreters. However, there's an increasing demand in the UK from local government organisations, national organisations and corporations to make I often get emails requesting my services. And I always have to explain to the hearing because of the cost and living. And so with this group of deaf interpreters, we also have some from our deaf colleagues as much work as we can. So we turn down all the pre-recorded work and we interpreter for BBC News 24. So it's live news. Deaf people at that time couldn't access the captions. There wasn't speech-to-text translations like there is now. So the deaf people would work on TV but do all the pre-recorded work. And there was a big team of deaf interpreters. So the point I'm trying to make is sometimes we have to say deaf interpreter in order to educate the hearing world.
Can I respond? I'm going to respond to Maureen's question first. We have different training institutions globally that we can look to. An interpreter training program should be for anyone who wants to be an interpreter, no matter your hearing status. I've talked with interpreting teams of mine from the US, and we often see deaf interpreter trainings being separated. So we don't see these trainings happening with working with your colleagues as peers. There's no specific deaf interpreter training. Deaf interpreters should be able to and want to go through the same interpreter training system that their hearing counterparts are. When you have an interpreting program, it's important that it be open and accessible for everybody, deaf, hearing alike. There's no separate tracks for this work. If you have an interpreter training program, it needs to be open to anyone wanting to be an interpreter. At the end of the day, we're working as a team. So if we're being trained separately, that doesn't benefit anybody. So we don't. And also, I want us to keep in mind that an interpreter is not there for the deaf person. Interpreters, we are there for hearing people who don't know sign language. We often think that we're only there for one consumer. There are multiple consumers in a room. The deaf person happens to be one of them, but we are primarily there for the hearing people to be able to have access to the deaf person. So our training programs need to make sure that they're including deaf people. Whether that be the Wits University or any other specific trainings that we have out there. There might be some separate trainings specifically focused on deaf interpreters to work as a group, or trainings working on your skills into the spoken language, but the overall program needs to be inclusive of everyone and have the cohort go through together. Now for Jackie's comment. So there's the Deaf Interpreter Network at Afsli. I have been a participant at that conference before. And so looking at the system in the UK and what their processes are, there are a large number of deaf interpreters in the UK. There's over 1,000 in the UK. In total, the qualified interpreters are a lesser number. For the NRCPD registry for interpreters in the UK, it does state that there needs to be kind of a clear indicator of status, whether you're a deaf interpreter or a hearing interpreter, just so they're able to have the statistics and the numbers for a census. So those labels can be mandatory or important in certain places. Similar to when we're filling out a census form and they would like to know someone's gender, they need to know certain demographic background information. So that's when those labels do become necessary. So there is definitely a time and a place where we need to have those labels of a deaf interpreter or a hearing interpreter. And it is nice to also have kind of that registry where you can show these are the interpreters available to you who can do this job. I work with Robert Adam and other deaf interpreters as well who have also worked on BBC News. And so there, and as you mentioned, Jackie, there is lots of live broadcasting, or maybe the king has to give a speech, and they always have interpreters there, but there is often a pre-recording. And then so they record it 10 to 15 minutes prior, and then the broadcasting happens afterwards. So it's live-ish. So kind of a mix of pre-recording and a live setting. And the pre-recording is so they can do editing and touch things up, make sure the background is correct, and have everything look nice for when it is truly broadcasted.
All right, I'm going to take on two more, one and then the last one, because of time.
All right, thank you. Yeah, my name is Tracy. Yes, Razak, personally, it's like my first time seeing live, deaf interpreters and a hearing interpreter working hand in hand. And I know this is the same case for so many of us here in an African setup. So when an organization or someone approaches me, knowing with the knowledge I have right now and the importance of having a deaf interpreter, how do I start explaining to them that this baby conference is in need of a deaf interpreter? Like, how do I even start that conversation? Secondly, in terms of remuneration, how does it work? Does quote unquote, the hearing interpreter and the deaf interpreter share the costs? Or how do you invoice or do that quotation? Thank you.
And then the last question, then he will answer at once.
I'm from Uganda. I have a question. Deaf interpreter, yes, we feel it is important, but are we thinking about the future? With the AI growing globally, the world is changing, technology is developed, and it's growing. Different countries are adopting technology. There are apps there. For example, yesterday, I was sharing with South Africa. They showed me some interesting app where a person can sign. I was ignorant about it. How do they sign? And it was very clear. So does this deaf interpreter have a future? With learning of master's, PhD in sign language, and in the future you have AI, they lose their job. How will it be? Explain to me.
I will give quick responses. I've been told we're short on time. What country are you from?
I'm from Kenya.
Kenya, okay. Obviously, every country has their different systems and structures. We're all very diverse. In Kenya, if you would like to have a blended team, we all have our interpreting ethics, and your country has probably their own standard of practice and interpreting ethics that you have to follow, what criteria you have to hit. So having a blended team does not mean that one person has more authority than the other. You're working as a team, which means your pay is equal. No one is paid more or less than the other. No one would be happy if they were working with a team where they knew that the other interpreter was getting paid more than them, even though you're doing the same work. We want to think of how we can have more respect and equity within our work overall, and we can use our current policies and ethics to advocate for that. We see this often with the gender pay gap, where women are often paid less than men. So we fight and lobby for equal pay in terms of gender, and we want to make sure we do the same in our interpreting teams as well. If we're doing the same work, we're all going to get equal pay. And when you're putting in a bid for an interpreting job, or you're trying to fill the interpreting needs, you're just giving the names of the interpreters. You can also work with your national deaf associations and the interpreting associations. As we've said multiple times over the past 2 days, it's so important for those associations to work together, and that's how you can also make sure that you have blended teams at your conferences and your meetings. And let's see, I'm a bit surprised by the second question, so I'm trying to figure out how best to answer the future of our interpreting work and AI. I think it's not just for deaf interpreters. There's a bit of an unknown for the future of all interpreting work. With the developments of AI, how fast it's growing, I think we have a lot of fear and anxiety around the fact that AI could potentially take over our jobs. I've seen animated movies, right? We've been watching animated movies for the last 30 years. And it took a long time for animation to make any changes to be able to really capture specific facial movements and features. And so technology, there's been many moments in time where we've been afraid of technology taking over the world and replacing all of our jobs by machines and computerized technologies. But I think that we will always have a place as interpreters, for deaf and hearing interpreters. I don't think we need to be afraid of our work coming to an abrupt end. If interpreters are going to be replaced, it's all of us. But AI is still unable to do the same functions that we are as human interpreters. There is no true equivalent. So I think all of us as interpreters have a future. If the world completely collapses, then we all collapse with it. So it is not specific to any one group.
All right, thank you so much, Razak. Members, a round of applause to Razak. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. Members, thank you for your active participation. I hand over to the MC. Thank you.
Another round of applause, please. Whose glasses are these? Thank you very much. Now it is time for lunch. We will use the same place we used yesterday. Those who went to the tent, they will proceed to the tent. And those on the rooftop, they will use the rooftop. There is one announcement.
Please remember, in the morning we said that the deaf interpreters and the deaf to meet on this corner with Ayesha and Arunas before lunch. So before you go for lunch, please let's meet here. Deaf interpreters and the deaf. And secondly, if you are from the various countries in Africa that we mentioned yesterday, if you are representing your country and you are the only one, or the president of that country, please ensure to see Christopher Deslodges from Canada. The gentleman, Christopher, would you please just stand up so that they can see you? So Malawi, Eswatini, Nigeria, all the countries represented here, please see Christopher.
Thank you. For others, please go to the same place you used yesterday. Use 1 hour. That is why I was asking.
What time did you say people are supposed to come back?
We are coming back. We are coming back at 1:30 p.m.